Hello, welcome to your weekly werewolf report and this, the year of the werewolf. We're just gonna sit and have a little chat today because this week was a fruitless one. I knew it was gonna happen. I've tried to avoid them, but it happened. It happened this week. I didn't care for the book and I didn't care for either of the movies that I watched. And because we're trying to be up over here, we're not going to name anybody. We're not going to shame anybody because these were all small creators. They don't deserve that. And because we live by the dictum of art is subjective, I don't want anybody to think that my word has any sort of weight or real bearing when it comes to these works. Just real quick, kind of a quick rundown. With the book, the thing is the story itself was good. It had a lot of great monster stuff in it. It had great monster lore, some new stuff that I'd never seen before. The problem was, two problems. The main problem is that this book was very, very bloated and it needed to be trimmed down. Maybe not by half, but this book could have easily been cut by a third and it would have been a much easier read, a much more enjoyable read. And here's the thing. When I'm reading, because I do want to read for fun, when I'm doing that, I want to make sure that my writer hat is off and the fuck away from me because I want to be fair and I don't want to be judging some other writer's craft against my own. First of all, because that's who the hell am I? But second of all, it takes the fun out of it. Now, what I do sometimes is I have a notebook. And if I read something by another writer that's just, oh, so good, a turn of phrase or just a description of something that is just delicious, I'll write it down. And that, for me, is fun because it keeps all of this, which, the writing and the reading and the creating and making YouTube videos that don't get much watch and making podcasts that don't get much listens. It keeps it fun and fresh because ultimately what I'm trying to do is live a creative life. And I am. And I don't want to get down on anything. So if I read a book that I don't like, I want to make sure that I'm not liking it for reader reasons, not writer reasons. So this book was bloated. And if I had never written a word in my life, never published a single book, that would have bothered me regardless. The second problem with the book has a little bit to do with writery. And again, I think it would have bothered me regardless, but it bothers me more because I write. There are not all the characters, not all the dialogue. Not all the dialogue is bad. Not all the characters talk this way, but there were a certain set of characters in this book, and every time they spoke, nobody talks like that. Nobody would talk like that. Nobody would fawn over something like that. That's silly. And it kept taking me out of the story. But the shame of it is monster-wise, it could have been great. It could have been maybe not one of my favorites, but one I absolutely would have been happy to recommend here. As it is, no. And I don't feel good about it. We'll try again next week. With the movies, I watched 2 movies. Now, one great thing about both the movies that I watched is you remember last week, I was kind of disturbed and perturbed about these monster movies that are 2+ hours long, which I'm standing by it. There is no reason on this green earth why a monster movie, especially a low budget one, that should be more than 90 minutes long. And both of these movies were short. The first one was only an hour long, and the second one came in at just under 90 minutes. They were both perfect lengths. The first movie, God, I really want to talk about it for various reasons. It had a fantastic cameo. I didn't know going in that this cameo would be into it, and I was screaming. It has a fantastic title. The title of this movie was so fun, and I went into it with high hopes. I keep trying to do that, I'm seeing so many bad movies. Week to week, I keep coming being like, I don't want to talk about that one, but I keep going in with high hopes. And I went into this one with high hopes, and it played like an experimental film. And it definitely did the style over substance thing. You know what it looked like most of the time. Remember in the early to mid 90s when alternative was kind of creeping into the popular culture for a while music-wise? And remember how weird the music videos were for a while? That's kind of how this movie plays. It doesn't really tell a story. It just got weird. And the parts that were trying to tell a story were very disjointed. The pacing was very stumbly. It just wasn't well made. The storytelling wasn't well done. And I'm honestly kind of devastated because I want to talk about this movie so bad. The second one, it did everything right. It did everything right, except it was somehow boring. It had a great monster, like low budget monster. We're understanding of that here. And it had an articulated mouth, which is like, I know the bar is low, but that always makes me happy to see. And there were a lot of murders, a lot of deaths. It's just, the problem being is that they were all done exactly the same, with exactly the same camera angles. And it was boring. And it was a shame because the people who made both of these movies that I watched this week, these were horror fans who made these movies. And being someone who really doesn't know much about movie making, I wonder what goes wrong with between the conceptualizing and the writing of the script to the editing to the finished product. What keeps going wrong here? And it's disappointing. Now, for the kind of chatty part here, like I said last week, what I am doing with this immersion into werewolf things, it's stupid. It's very stupid and ill-advised, but I'm going to do it again. I may need a year's break after doing the werewolf thing, but who knows, maybe after a year's break I'll want to do haunted houses, which is another one of my favorites. I'll do maybe another year werewolves, demonic possessions, small town horror, non-supernatural horror. I'm actually enjoying myself. But don't do this. Don't do this. You will end up hating your subject. I'm being careful not to let hatred come into this, but I am starting to see some patterns. Now, I came into this as a way to kind of rescue the reputation of the werewolf. As a way, because I know so many people who say, I don't like werewolves, I don't care about werewolves, they're not my thing. And it's always kind of confused me because the books and the movies that we all cite as great, the ones that I've listed in previous videos, they're so goddamn good. They're so good. You're depriving yourself of wonderful, wonderful horror creations by not watching or reading those. But as I'm reading more of these books, and more so as I'm watching more of these movies, I'm starting to understand a little more. With any sort of storytelling that follows maybe a formula or maybe just a similar path, like with monsters, with our good old established monsters like werewolves and vampires, there's an established path. And there's nothing wrong with sticking to that path. It's the classics. There's nothing wrong with sticking to that. Not everything needs to be fresh and new. But there is a way that you walk down that path in your storytelling that can become stale and stagnant. And I'm starting to see stale and stagnant. I'm starting to see things that are overused. And I'm starting to get why people don't care about werewolves a little more. It's not dampening my love for them, not one bit. Not one of these movies that I've watched that have just they've killed my soul a little bit, but they have not killed my love for werewolves. And which is good. I'm a hardy person, don't worry about me. But I get it. I get it. We need some creatives to step in and liven up this monster. We need fresh takes. And I was thinking, the werewolf is always a masculine creature. Not always, but usually. Usually a masculine creature. And remember what a big deal it was when Ginger Snaps came out? It wasn't the first female werewolf movie, but it really leaned in to the lunar cycle, the 28-day cycle, and lined that up with menstruation. And it had the similar effects that it does on masculine characters. There was the heightened aggression, the heightened sex drive, the body horror, the slow changes. Sometimes they're slow changes, sometimes they're fast changes. And it did it all so perfectly. And I've always wondered, why don't we get more of that? Why don't we get more exploration of that? You know, in the year 2023, not everybody who menstruates is necessarily a woman at this time. And that might be something interesting to explore with lycanthropy and a 28-day cycle. I would like to see something fresh, because there's a lot of the same, and I feel like the parallel monster to werewolves is usually the vampire, and I feel like the vampire has gotten more exploration, probably because there's more maybe sex appeal, which is gross. I'm sorry, that's gross, but maybe because there's more sex appeal, maybe because it's easier to communicate with a vampire than with a werewolf that is often a sort of senseless rage, destructive thing. I don't know, but it needs to be freshened up. And look, I know nobody's throwing my hat in the ring, name in the ring, but I have written a werewolf novella years and years ago, and I showed it to someone who hated it, and I put it away. For good reason. I would like to take it out and look at it again. What I did wasn't particularly fresh. I'm someone who very much respects classical footsteps, and I like to do that. I'm also a fan of not answering questions, leave things up to mystery, and I wonder if I can make it work. Why not? You know, but I would like other creators to do that too. Give me something new. Give me something fresh. Let's take this poor neglected monster and really make it more modern. Because as of right now, it's not a super modern monster. It's very much kind of stagnated in the 1980s, where it's been for a very long time. No shade there. My favorite werewolves, my top 3 are in the 80s. But I just would like to see it treated better, because there's a lot of lazy storytelling being done. And it's disappointing. And this is just coming from me. I'm nose deep in it. I'm wading through it, doing a lot of reading, a lot of watching of movies. And I'm purposely watching low budget movies because I want to support the indie creators, but 2, I'm looking for that newness. I'm looking for that they tried something really different and out there. And I am seeing kind of big swings. They're not working though. So onward and upward. So that'll be it this week. Hopefully next week will be better. The book that I'm reading this week, okay, so I'm not 100% sure it's a werewolf book. I don't like to read reviews. Reviews are spoilery. It looks like there's definitely a werewolf in it, but I don't think it's the main monster. I'm not 100% sure. We'll talk about it next week. Honestly, I got this book because I'm obsessed with the cover. Yes, I do it too. But I'm just not sure that it's a werewolf book. I'll have to get into it first, and I'll let you know. And then we'll try again with the movies. We're doing what we can over here. So I hope the world is treating you well. I hope you're doing okay. I hope you're enjoying some sunshine. I hope you're enjoying a little bit of a lift in spirits with the changing season. And if you have any recommendations, any thoughts about anything I've talked about, feel free to reach out. I'm a nice person. I don't bite, usually. But that'll be it this week. So I'll see you next week for another weekly werewolf report. So bye!